Welcome to the TufFish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Michelle Cox. Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I would love for you to start with, how did you get into writing?
Good question. I thought about being a writer, maybe like in high school, and so I was trying to always decide whether I wanted to be a writer or a doctor. And so when I got to college, I decided that getting an MD would be easier than being a writer. Turns out it's true. No, just kidding. Yeah, so I pursued pre-med for a couple of years, and then I just decided, to that I had to really follow my heart. So I switched back to not creative writing, but to literature. So that's what I ended up getting a major in, and then after that, I just promptly forgot about it. I mean, I got a job in working at a nursing home, and that actually provided a lot of great content for my writing life. But I didn't really start thinking about being a writer seriously until, I don't know, it was probably like 2012. um, my oldest was diagnosed as a sophomore with ADHD, and I kind of had a freak out. And so I quit everything, and I was doing a lot of volunteer work and a lot of, committee work and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you've got to stop and help your child. So I did. And that was good, but it didn't really take as much time to get him on track as I thought. So then I had this big glut of time, and I'm like, you can either go back to volunteering, or you can maybe get a job, or you could try to write the novel that you have always wanted to write, but you were afraid to write. So I said, I'm going to try to write this novel. And it wasn't to get published, honestly. It was just to see if I could sit in a chair long enough and actually write a whole novel. And I did it. And so then I gave it to my friends and family, and they're like, "Oh, this is great. You should try to publish it." And I was kind of baffled by that, like, publish it? Well, why would I do that? So then I thought, "Oh, all right, I guess I could try, but I knew nothing about it. And, that was a whole huge other learning curve, as we all know. And the story goes from there. I mean, I that book never got published. I tried for a year to get an agent to pick it up, and I finally decided I was doing something wrong, either with the writing or the publishing pursuit. So I went to the Writers Digest conference in New York, and there I sort of started learning more about the publishing industry, and just went from there.
So then what did you do after you came back from the conference? That's a really interesting path to have. You've gone from one to, you go to this conference. So now what? Now what happens? I feel
Well,
like you left me on a cliffhanger.
sorry. Well, what happened is that I was the newest newbie that ever was. And so it was so fresh, and it was exciting, and I was in New York, and I was get this writing thing. And um I was very starry-eyed, and everybody that I spoke to was a little bit more maybe experienced, and they were very, very soured on the whole publishing industry, which, remember, I knew nothing about at that point. And they were very sort of down on traditional publishing. And, it's, you know, I was listening in to a lot of conversations, and people were saying, it's almost impossible to get published. And, I was feeling more and more depressed as as the weekend went on. And so then the first panel that I actually went to was, it was Kristen Harnish and her agent, April Eberhardt. And she was talking about her experience with She Writes Press. And I'd never heard of them. And she was saying that her book was picked up HarperCollins Canada, but she wanted a US release at the same time, but HarperCollins USA wouldn't pick it up for some reason. And so they were quickly trying to find somebody in the United States that could release the book at the same time. And so they came across She Writes Press, and they put the book out through them. and it was, it was a perfect match. They had both versions there, and it did really well. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I went into the second panel, which was run by Kristen Harnish, and she was talking about, or not Kristen Harnish, but April Eberhardt, her agent, and she was talking about the three paths to publishing. And I'm like, wow, three paths. What is this? And so she was talking about self-publishing, traditional publishing with the big five, now the big four, and sort of a middle path, hybrid publishing. And I just thought that it sounded fantastic. And, I was vigorously taking notes and looking around like, are you guys hearing this? This sounds great. Oh my God. So I went home and I researched different hybrid publishers, and of course She Writes Press was one of those that I researched. And I just thought their whole concept sounded amazing. And so I submitted my big gargantuan novel, which, I had been spending a year trying to shop. And at first they said, yeah, we'll take it. And then I wrote them this email saying, oh, I'm so happy that you're going to take my novel, which is 240,000 words. I'm like, what? Oh my God. So clearly they didn't see that part of the email. And because they had sort of screwed up, they, Brooke Warner, the publisher herself, got on the phone with me, and she's like, there's just no way we can put this through the press. It's just, we
Needs to be
can't do it.
cut.
Yeah. She's like, no, we're not doing this. I said, well, how about this other novel that I've written? It's a mystery. And she's like, we'll send it over. So they read it, and they said, yeah, we'll take this. And so that was the start of the Henrietta and Inspector Howard series. There you go.
So I love that. So would it be something to go back to that very first gargantuan, as you called it, novel, and see what could you do differently with having more experience under your belt? Or is it something where you're like, no, I like it the way it is because it was where I started and I want to leave it the way it is, for
No,
myself.
it's terrible. No, it's not terrible. It's just that I didn't know what I was doing at all. I mean, I literally Googled how to write a novel and found this snowflake method thing, and I thought I was following it exactly, and obviously I wasn't, because the novel came out to be 240,000 words. So, but my friends and family really loved the story, and they said, aren't you ever going to do anything with that book? It's such a great story. And I'm like, maybe, but the problem is that, I've stolen a lot of characters from that book and put them into the series. So if I did take the core story, I would have to completely, restructure the book.
And that's
So
fair.
maybe someday.
That's fair. That's totally fair. That is totally fair. So I love how the path kind of led you in a different way. And but I also love the fact that you weren't afraid to rework and try a different path, because it wasn't just that you tried, which publishing path should I go? You showed, hey, one path isn't working, let me try another path. But you also said, okay, I have this other manuscript, what do you think? So your agility is really cool. I love that you show the agility in writing and in the publishing space, because you are taking on different things and experimenting. You're using your creativity and curiosity to see where it takes you.
Yeah, thanks. Something that Brooke Warner, the publisher of She Writes, talks about is, if you're a career writer, you're probably going to be the most successful if you can be a hybrid author, not hybrid published, but a hybrid author, which is taking the publishing path that best serves your book at that moment in time. So that might be the big five. For certain books, it might be self-publishing. Other books, work best for a hybrid. And I think that that's really true. And I've tried to really embrace that and just not get locked into one path.
That's awesome. I love that tip. No, I do, because I think you're right that it can be really easy to get myopic on, this is the path that I need, or I'm supposed to take, or I had this big dream, and it's like, it's not that you can't achieve that dream. There just might be another way to get you there. And instead of going like you think is A to B, you might be going A to E to get to B.
Yes, exactly. And I think especially in this crazy publishing industry right now, you have to be able to do that because it's just tough to stick to one path and just think that that's the end all be all because that just isn't reality anymore.
So I would love for you to talk about Henrietta and Inspector Howard because it's a series. So, what was it like to actually create a series? Did you have, for instance, the idea of the series in its entirety thought through, or is it more of a, I'm going to call it standalones within a series, meaning these characters, you could read them out of order and
Mhm.
you still would follow what's going on, but yet they're still under the umbrella?
Well, I didn't when I started writing A Girl Like You, which is book one, and I wrote it kind of because at the time I was a little bit angry with the publishing industry. Like, why can't I have a 240,000 word book? So I'm like, well, I'll show you. I can write like a short book and it can be smart and sexy and funny and mysterious and all this kind of stuff and something an agent will love. And, after I finished the book, as I've said, I wasn't really that keen on getting it traditionally published in the first place. And so this book that I had written for an agent, I ended up not submitting it to a single agent at all and just, submitted it to She Writes and said, oh, would you take it? So when I wrote it, I wasn't thinking that it was a series. It was just supposed to be a one-off sort of agent, sort of tease thing. And so then halfway through it though, I really started to love the characters of Henrietta and Clive and all the side characters. And I thought, I don't want this book to end. I want it to keep going. And I'm like, maybe I'll make it into a series. Again, not understanding and all the mistakes I've made them. Um, didn't really understand the mystery formula, didn't really understand the series formula. I was just sort of writing what I would like to read. And I think that that was successful because, it turns out a lot of other people have enjoyed reading something that I would like to read. So it's just sort of a mashup. But anyway, back to the series. When I decided to make it a series, I realized that I was going to need to change some things because I didn't like the way it was set up. I didn't want it to just be about a cop and his wife in 1930s Chicago. I felt like that was kind of done before, and so I wanted to sort of expand their world. So I had Clive have a secret background, and so that I could sort of shift the series a little bit into what I wanted it to be, which was sort of a an upstairs downstairs kind of thing where we kind of have the glittering, social hierarchy of, the North Shore. And then we have the gritty city life characters who are continuing on in that. So I kind of wanted those worlds to cross. And so I had to shift the series a little bit. And are they standalones? Sort of,
Yeah.
but it's much better if you read the stories as a whole because each book has a mystery that sort of, comes to a conclusion, of course, but the character arcs just keep going and developing as the series goes along.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And I get your point about saying, okay, there's a formula for mystery or there's things to look for. And I get that and I respect that. And I also love the fact that you said, but I also wanted to write what I wanted to read. And I think that that's equally as important because there's a blend that can happen. Just like you said, that mashup that can happen because I believe that if you get that idea for this story and that it's with you and that you really want to write it, then somebody else wants to read it.
Yeah.
And you got to write it and then you got to talk about it. But then in the same breath, it'll find its people if you are willing to do that work by writing it and keep showing up and reworking it and then showing up when it's published to say, hey, let me talk a little bit more about it. Let me share. Let me let you know it's out here type of thing. So yeah,
Right.
I love that you did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you read a lot of mystery then?
No. I read a lot. I know that's probably part of the problem. I read a lot of mystery as a kid, so I was a mystery fiend. But then as I read up until about age 40, I read only the classics. So I
Nice.
that's just, what I would always pick up. And I've read very little contemporary fiction until after my third kid was born. I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I needed something that was more of an escape.
Yeah.
So my escape was pretty much into historical fiction.
Nice.
That's where my true heart lies. And that's why the books are all set in the 30s, is because I just, really adore that time period, the 30s and 40s. And it's kind of just a way for me to sort of live in that world, is to write myself back there. So, um, yeah, mostly what I read right now is historical fiction still. I try
So,
to throw in a mystery true because I feel like I should, but oh well.
and I like that though. So with historical fiction, yes, it's fiction, but the historical elements are really important to help ground the story and to help to create the world that you're in. So
Yeah.
what is it like when you're doing that? So are there some tips that you would offer about researching to make sure that as you're writing historical fiction that you're considering when you're if you're going to write a historical fiction novel?
Well, I think what's important is to maybe have an era or an event within an era that you kind of are going to focus the book around, or a person. Um but to not so to do a little bit, to know a little bit about the subject. So for example, book 6 of the series that I'm writing right now, part of it involves an art theft in the 1930s in Belgium, the Ghent altarpiece. And so that's a real thing that happened. So I did a little bit of reading, but to me, I just feel like the story is more important. So to me, it's the story. So I sort of have an idea of what I'm going to be writing about, the era, the whatever. I write the story, and a lot of the details I just write and XXX in the manuscript, and know that I'm going to go back after I've written the book, almost like a treat, and then you get to sort of fill in the blanks. And I think that that also helps for you to not do info dumps, and it helps to not go down too many rabbit holes. So that would be my advice.
I love that because you're focused on a few things there. It's first, staying out of your own way. When procrastination, it might sound like, oh, well, I need to do this research to a point. But if it's
Mhm.
so much so that it's precluding you from finishing that chapter or, saying, well, I don't know where to take this or I've lost that thought, you know, it could be that you're trying to overcome a form of writer's block or imposter syndrome, like, well, who do I think I am to write this because I've done all this research. It's almost like too much information. So to your point, backing up, knowing you need to fill in the details, but you get the idea of the story, the characters you want to include, the pieces of it that you need, and you're willing to go back and rewrite and rework accordingly. That's when you're also able to help make sure you're researching for the right pieces too. It's not just researching because this Google search went to this Google search, went to this Google search, and what happened? Where'd you go now?
Right. What was I looking for? Yeah, no, yeah. And that the only time that that happened to me was in book 4, where I did go down a rabbit hole, and I, the typical thing happened. There was so much information in this chapter, and then I had to go, you spend so much time writing it, and then you realize that you probably need about a sentence of this. You don't need, all these paragraphs. So, I did the thing I said I would never do. And now that I've done it, I'll never do it again. So,
So, a question for you then. How did you, when you think you have too much information or when you encountered that, what advice would you give someone who might be stuck realizing I've got way too much and I don't know how to get out of it? What would you recommend for how they can step back and sift through and re-engage?
well, I think that I'm not exactly sure if this is what you mean, but one thing that I do to trick myself is I set up an extra text file. So I say to myself, okay, this is sounding like too much. So, but then the other part of me is like, but this is so great. I need this in the book. So then I say to myself, okay, take this chunk out, put it, you're not deleting, you're just putting it in this extra file. You can always get it back, but let's just put it over there and then just see how it reads. And that has been really, really helpful because, 9 times out of 10, I realize I don't need that. And if you want to further trick yourself, you can say, well, I'll just use this as, content for something else at another time. Your newsletter subscribers get extra content or something like that. So you feel like you haven't really wasted your time. I actually never use it. Secret hint. But at the time I believe that I am going to use it somehow.
But
So
I love that because you're right. You have spent the time on it in some way. So by taking it and moving it someplace else, so it's not in the line of sight, but it's not just deleted outright
right.
either. I think that that's a great way because, to your point, maybe it is something that shows up a little bit later for your newsletter. Maybe it isn't, but in that moment, that's what you needed to do. And I think that
Right.
that's important. You honored that moment and what you did create by not just saying, if I don't really know what else to do with it, just simply move it out of the off to the side for a little bit, and then it'll become clearer.
Right. And then I think another important thing to do is to just move on and just say to yourself, you know what? I've put it in the file over here. I'm just going to move on to the next chapter and go back and revisit this in a week and see if, I still feel the same way about it. And 9 times out of 10, it's you don't need it. Occasionally I have gone back to the extra text file and say, there's a couple lines in there that I do think need to go back. So, it's not all is lost, but it is helpful to have a little bit of time to sort of have a different perspective.
It's amazing how just taking a little break in some way always helps.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know that this series is also with audiobooks.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah.
is the coolest thing. Would you talk a little bit about how you made that transition from taking the book and what those steps might have been, or what to consider when you are looking to take your book and turn it into an audiobook format?
Yeah, well, I felt the pressure to get an audiobook out there because, that's all you hear is audio, audio, audio is king, audio is king. And so signed up with ACX Audible, but it was really tough finding the right narrator because I had already written several of the books of the series by the time I got around to putting the first book on audio. And I knew that eventually they're going to travel to England and there's going to be a whole cast of English characters. And so I needed somebody to be able to do an authentic British accent. And I'm married to a Brit, so I can tell if it's fake. So I put that out there, in the audition. And I'm like, you have to be able to, you know, do a British accent. And it was terrible. It was going terribly. And I'm like, oh God, this is a mistake. So then I had the idea of kind of going, I don't even, if you asked me how to do this, I wouldn't even know. I found it by accident. Like you kind of went in the back end of ACX and was able to find a list of their narrators and sort of their filters and, so I'm like, ooh. So I was looking for ones that were British and I found there's a long version of the story and the short. Let's go with the short. I found this woman who's a Brit living in LA. Her name's Jane Entwistle, and she does bit parts in sitcoms. She has her own stand-up comedy routine. She does tons of voiceover work. She does commercials, whatever. So I reached out to her and I said, I'd love for you to audition for this. And she did it. And I said, I wanted to hire her. And I went with her and we did book one. And I was so excited. I thought I was, going to make millions of dollars. And no, it did well, but ACX is very limiting. And then Findaway came out, and I did a lot of research on Findaway, and I decided that I was going to take the plunge and jump ship, because Findaway Findaway. I don't know, for any listeners who don't know anything about it. Findaway is this platform where it's like ACX. You can upload your book there, and then it distributes it out. So it distributes to over 40 different platforms, including ACX. So I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? Especially because it distributed to library markets. And I know that a lot of my readers utilize the library. And I thought this is a great way for them to be able to hear the book on audio too. So I just thought it made a ton of sense. And also you can, run your own promotions. You can raise and lower the prices. The pricing is up to you. There's all these different, promotions you can do. They're also aligned with Chirp, which is the audio arm of BookBub, which is, the end all be all for book sales. So to me, it just made a lot of sense. So I contacted Jane and I said, hey, are you able to upload onto Findaway? And she said, yeah, for sure. So I paid her one gigantic fee to do books 2 through 5. And so we put them all up. I got my book back out of ACX, put it into Findaway, and then just redistributed it. So
Love it.
yeah. So now, it's going really well. I think I've hit the 10,000 book sale mark. Yeah, on audio.
That's
So it's been really great because I'm able to run a lot of different promotions. So highly recommend that.
Love that. I love that. And I love how you shared some bits and pieces about things to think about and navigating through. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun and so many good nuggets too. Michelle, thank you so
Good.
much. Where can people connect with you and where can they get the books?
Well, you can get the books anywhere, really. You can go to my website, michellecoxwrites.com, and there's all the social media icons there. You can find me. The books are Amazon, your local bookstore, your local library, anywhere books are sold. I highly encourage everybody to sign up for my newsletter. There's a newsletter tab because I run really big giveaways every few months, and that's only for subscribers. I do all different ones. One winner one year got flowers delivered to them every month for a year. So
Oh, neat.
yeah,
Neat.
so some really cool giveaways, and like I said, only for subscribers. So sign up.
I take it that there's still goodies to come.
Oh yes, there'll be a big Valentine's Day giveaway, and there's usually a spring one. So yeah, you'll plenty of giveaways.
Awesome. Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.